statement. And now I give the floor to Permanent Representative of the Russian Federation, please.
Thank you, Madam President. We thank Ms. Nakamitsu for her briefing. Madam President, the year since the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic sorely tested the entire world and is remembered chiefly for its difficulties and its losses. Many diplomatic efforts also suffered as negotiating work stalled in a whole host of areas. However, against this backdrop, there is at least one positive exception, namely the multilateral discussions on international information security in the UN. They were able not only to maintain their momentum, but also to achieve, and I don't hesitate to use the word, historic results. Both of the relevant expert platforms under the auspices of the UN General Assembly, the group of governmental experts, and the open-ended working group were able to agree their outcome reports by consensus. The negotiations in these groups were not simple. And nevertheless, we have this hard-won outcome. This clearly demonstrated that the international community can reach agreement on key issues when the dialogue is pragmatic, depoliticized, and constructive. Thanks to these efforts, we now find ourselves on the threshold of a new major phase, which was launched in June of this year during the organizational session of the new 2021 to 2025 open-ended working group. We believe that this result is the shared achievement of the international community. For our part, we have been working for more than a decade to make our contribution to the process of establishing a global international information system, a security system. And it was Russia in 1998 that first raised the need to combat threats in the sphere of international information security in the UN by proposing the UN General Assembly resolution on that. At the beginning of the 2000s, we proposed the creation of an expert platform to discuss IIS, the group of governmental experts. When it became clear that this subject had outgrown the narrow bounds of the expert group, we, in response to the call from the international community and together with like-minded states, in 2019 launched an open and democratic negotiating process on IIS with the involvement of all member states, that is to say, the open-ended working group. In doing so, a major milestone was passed. For the first time, discussions of security in the digital sphere were available to the UN majority. And our thinking on this was very simple. We stand for an equal and mutually respectful dialogue. If everyone is equal in the face of IIS threats, then those threats should be discussed not in a small group of technologically advanced states, but by all members of the UN. Nothing should be imposed by those who consider themselves more advanced. Our proposals, be it the GGE or later the OEWG, didn't initially please everyone. A number of states, including some participating in today's meeting, voted against their creation. However, they gradually joined in the discussion and then began to actively and constructively participate in it. Effective multilateral diplomacy on international information security in the UN complements the bilateral interaction of states in this area. It's a perfect example of how these sorts of issues should be resolved in order to reduce mutual mistrust and alleviate concerns. Unfortunately, in parallel, we see a dangerous trend of attempts to impose unilateral interpretations of the agreements in the group of governmental experts and the open-ended working group on the Security Council, essentially proposing that they either be supported or worse, that the outcome of discussions in platforms of the UNGA be revised. We consider these attempts to be destructive. They are nudging the international community towards unpredictable and undesirable confrontations. In particular, some countries are trying to distort the agreements that have been reached, including on the international legal aspects of the use of information and communication technologies, to justify unilateral pressure and sanctions against other member states, and also the possible use of force against them. Of particular concern is the stance of a number of technologically advanced states to militarize the information space by advancing the concept of so-called preventive military cyberstrikes, including against critically important infrastructure. These confrontational doctrines contradict their stated commitment to preventing conflicts in the use of ICTs, which have also been repeated today. We see this as an attempt to use their position of strength to impose their own rules of the game in the information sphere. I'd like to underscore that although the digital sphere is not unregulated, discussions of how exactly international law can apply to it are far from over. These questions will need to be discussed for at least another 5 years at the relevant UNGA body, the new open-ended working group. The provisions of the GGE and OEWG reports on this represent a precisely calibrated and balanced package of agreements, including on the need to develop new norms of responsible state behavior in the information sphere that reflect its specificities. The initial list of rules was enshrined in the GA resolution on IIS that was adopted upon the initiative of Russia in 2018. Today, we are unfortunately seeing attempts to single out some of these provisions that are more beneficial for our Western colleagues, and at the same time with an incorrect interpretation of the automatic application of international law in the digital sphere, which would allow the possible use of force therein, and also attempts to present their national viewpoints as the subject of global consensus. We will therefore oppose any attempts to revise through the Security Council the balanced agreements reached at UNGA bodies. Madam President, Russia's doctrinal approaches to creating a global regime for ensuring international information security, as the President of the Russian Federation, President Putin, said during a meeting of the Security Council of the Russian Federation on the 26th of March, remain open, transparent, and unchanged. They are enshrined in the document that was adopted in April this year on the basis of the state's policy on international information security. This is a public document, and I urge you all to take a look at it. Our doctrine is based on the idea of ICTs being used solely for peaceful purposes, as well as the need to prevent conflicts in the information space and the importance of strengthening multilateral and bilateral cooperation to that end. We think it is important that universal international legal agreements be concluded that would effectively support these aims. To achieve this, joint efforts will be needed to draft and agree on universal, just, and comprehensive rules of state behavior in the information space that take into account contemporary realities, to delineate acceptable and unacceptable actions therein, and to make these rules legally binding so that they are strictly adhered to by states. At the same time, we stand for the inviolability of state sovereignty in the digital sphere. Each country must independently determine the parameters of how they regulate their own information space and the corresponding infrastructure. An equally important task is building a peaceful, equal, and just system of international information security where the interests of all countries will be taken into account, regardless of the level of development of their digital potential. Efforts must be wholeheartedly supported to encourage this, efforts undertaken under the auspices of the UN and those aimed at overcoming the digital divide. We hope that the new open-ended working group, in accordance with its mandate, will be able to continue the detailed study of this matter and come up with recommendations on it. Moreover, Together, we need to combat the use of ICTs for criminal purposes. We call on member states to make a constructive contribution to the work of the committee tasked with producing a draft convention on this by the year 2023. Madam President, the key platform for discussing international information security issues is still the UN General Assembly. That is where expert discussions on all aspects of this subject will take place over the next 5 years. Let's focus on supporting this unique process. The constructive atmosphere of multilateral cooperation on IIS under the UN auspices must be preserved in the OEWG, which has proven its effectiveness and necessity in practice. If we can do that, then the new OEWG will have a real chance of achieving tangible, practical results. And our shared duty as members of the Security Council is to comprehensively support this. Thank you.
I thank the permanent representative of the Russian Federation for his